Hello, Anne. My name is Ethan. Allow me to introduce to you Daniel, Jessica, and Lochie. Together, we have analyzed and compared Company 1 and Company 2 through calculating their profitability, asset efficiency, capital structure, and liquidity. This will provide the best information to assist you on your investment of $10,000.
Brilliant. Thank you for the introduction, Ethan. So with profitability, our aim is to see what the objectives of our companies are and to see if they've actually met those profit objectives, and also to help you understand that what kind of risk is associated if you invest that $10,000 into either of these companies. We can see on our first ratio, on our return on equity, you can see that with more than 20% return on equity year on year, Company 1, blue shaded company, has a strong return for shareholders. And Company 2, it's not quite as good, as it's only around 1.5%, though but the company management is becoming more effective at using this equity in order to increase their equity and return. Slide. Yeah, the return on assets. So the management of Company 1 is better able to generate profit using company assets in Company 2, as it carries a higher return on assets, as we can see on the chart provided. We can see that even though both companies are increasing their ratio, the Company 1 is increasing it quite substantially and has quite a significant greater return in regards to percentage as a return on assets. And we can also, the gross profit margin. And even though we can say the sales have increased for Company 1, its cost of sales have remained the same in proportion, and this indicates it has a pretty consistent pricing policy. You can also see that the gross profit margin ratio has declined over time for Company 2, which suggests that it hasn't retained the same profit margin, and thus has not been able to mitigate increases in cost of sales. In regards to the net profit margin, Company 1 can be said to be more effective at turning revenue into profit compared to Company 2, as Company 1 has been able to control and reduce other expenses over time. If we compare this to the previous chart, we can see that Company 1 is actually increasing its net profit margin, but the gross profit margin had remained stable. So this suggests that they've reduced expenses, other expenses, but Company 2, on the other hand, even though it has control over expenses, and it resembles the previous chart, it still has a relative high amount of expenses if we compare it to Company 1. And next up.
So, Amy, what is asset efficiency? Asset efficiency is how quickly the profit can be returned to you. But why is this important? Efficiency works on profit maximization to get your investment back even faster than another company. Asset turnover shows how effectively a company assets can create profit and generate revenue. We see that Company 1 creates more profit with its assets and is showing steady growth, whereas Company 2 is showing steady growth but isn't at that same base level. Slide. Inventory turnover shows how often they go through their inventory. There are many unknown factors that could explain this and many variables available to each company. As we see, Company 1 goes through their inventory the quickest. This can reflect greater sales for the company and another bonus for you to consider when investing. Days inventory show Company 2 takes longer to go through to turn a shelved raw materials into their final product, where company one is simply more efficient. They're getting their raw materials into a finished product much faster, much cleaner. Now to the other side of efficiency, where they hand out and collect their revenue and pay for their expenses. Debtors turnover. It shows company one has a better ability to extend credit, and company one also pays their credit a lot faster. 2 slides. Credit turnover shows how quickly they can pay back their debts. Company two pays them back a lot quicker, but has a lot less of those debts, where company one pays off those debts slower, but has less debts.
Thanks, Lochie. So the analysis of capital structure ratios provides us with the proportion of debt financing relative to equity financing and provides details of the company's financing decisions. Now, debt to asset ratio is an indication of how many dollars of liabilities exist per dollar of assets. Company one has a higher debt asset ratio throughout the 3 years analysed. A ratio of more than 50% shows greater reliance on debt to financing assets, which you can see company one has a greater ratio of 50%. Company two has a debt asset ratio under 50%, however, indicating that they have more assets in comparison to liabilities. Now, our debt to equity ratio is a measure of the level of financing compared to owners' funds. So company one has a higher debt to equity ratio, however, it is declining throughout the 3 years. This shows that company one uses debt to finance its growth rather than the owner's investors' funds. Company two's debt to equity ratio varies throughout the 3 years, as you can see via the graph, with greater reliance on owners' funds to finance the company. Now onto our equity ratio, which is an indication of how many dollars exist in equity per dollar of asset. Now, company one has an equity ratio less than 50%, which indicates that they use more debt to acquire assets. This is an indication of greater financial risk. Company two, however, has a higher equity ratio, greater than 50%, indicating that the company effectively funds assets with minimal debt. Now I will go over our interest coverage ratio, which measures the number of times earnings before tax can cover interest expense. So company one has a higher interest coverage ratio, indicating that they are paying off their obligations using earnings over 20 times per year. Company two, however, has a low interest coverage ratio, and a ratio of 3 times is considered adequate, which you can see in 2019 they had a ratio under 3 times, which just shows that they may not be able to meet their debt obligations. Now, our debt coverage ratio links our cash flow from operating activities with long-term debts. So company one's debt service coverage ratio indicates that they have the ability to pay off short-term or long-term debts with the use of operating income. Company two shows the same, however, with a higher debt coverage ratio, indicating that they have enough cash flow from operating activities to pay off debts faster.
Now to liquidity. Liquidity ratios measure the short-term ability to pay a company's short-term ability to pay its obligations and meet unexpected needs for cash. It consists of 2 ratios, the current and the quick ratio. Current ratio compares how many current assets are available to cover the current liabilities. The quick ratio measures immediate short-term liquidity. The current ratio's benchmark is 1.5 to 1, and as we see here, company one has good liquidity and has remained consistent throughout the years with slight growth in 2020. indicating efficient use of current assets. Company 2 has been very inconsistent, and in 2020 they are too liquid, resulting in a misuse of current assets. The quick ratio benchmark is 0.80 to 1 times. Company 1 are below but remain consistent, resulting in higher investment return but at a higher risk, although 2020 indicates better future performance. Company 2 remain inconsistent, and in 2020 they were very liquid at 1.45. They can easily pay short-term debts, but results in lower turnover for investors. For liquidity, Company 1 is the better choice for investment, as they can cover liabilities whilst using their assets to the fullest for better returns on your investment. In conclusion, after analyzing and deliberation of the two companies' data, we have deduced that Company 1 is the best choice for investment. This is because Company 1 has superior overall capital, structure, asset efficiency, liquidity, and profitability for its investors. Company 1's use of assets and signs of growth create the perfect opportunity to invest early, safely, and successfully. Thank you for watching, and best of luck.